Rinpoche first requests us to place our minds in the noble disposition of a bodhicitta, intending so that we intend to study Dharma in order to establish each and every sentient beings throughout the vast limits of space in utterly pure, most perfect and precious enlightenment. And before we carry on, I'd like to make two announcements. One's, before I forget, this afternoon there isn't a teaching session because it's 29th day and there's long Mahakala prayers, and I think Rinpoche is coming to the prayers, so there's only this morning's session. Anyway, there's not a session this afternoon. The second thing is a correction to yesterday afternoon's teaching, and I made a mistake there. I'm very sorry, and it's not too big, but in the thing about the Pratimoksha vow that has all the characteristics, we can say an authentic Pratimoksha vow, I said it needed to be supported by a compassionate understanding of the nature of samsara and renunciation. I shouldn't have put the stress on compassion because it makes confusion between the Hinayana and the Mahayana ways, and where all of the stress should be is on renunciation. The motivation should be renunciation of samsara. When there's a renunciation of samsara, then it's an authentic vow. Sorry, thank you. So. I spoiled his train of thought. We don't know what to do now.
Ta kazong aronso susu tabi damba hiwi kala yung tongbo somba ninju yapuji yogware. Tini somba ninju yapuji mena, tini susu tabi damba tseni pachi topa mare, si ngaroso tini hiyogware. Tabi de yanda ngaroso chu nyan nanda, la gong nanda, ta donano xiawa kari li na yung somba yapuji yona. 송지 센터고 주나 디 레카다 샤와 다 룽와 여서까지 레카 가리리오나 대용 취녀도 저로 요바래 추고 노니용 다 티바 첨부 기가 또도 된 바데 들이 저로 요바래 대인디 데라나 아로서 취년비가 선이나용 다 대링하고 취년진도 다 산제 동제 노제라나 미바용 도바 주고 송지죠 공포롱부 지지 토 디체도 다 가롱 거다 취시년 teni ngarong nyole she go so de ta ba ko somba ya pu ju na teni chunyan ji de be ge wa chi mo ro choro du ta de ta ba ma yin ba ta ngarong 지 강지지지도 나로냐네 시지지 대하소나 용 지 시작시나 야보레데 예나요 다 주티바 전부래면데 니바더서 지편 대서 전부면데 되나요 롱지버 데바토지도 롱지버 지부 초지다 마임바 다른 아로고 추냐 된디시지 대용 생자 탐제 데보지보 생자 탐제 등하데 자지지가 당도 다 나로고 냐히요 냐구 된디라고 지 선바야 보지 동보 ngo니 다 된디 간디
He doesn't understand English, but he's very perceptive. So he's starting by saying, we saw yesterday that in order to have a properly established pratimoksha vow, then it needs to be supported by a motivation of total renunciation. And this gives us a very good example of how the state of mind that one's in is actually what determines the overall nature of what we're doing. So there in that case it's when even though one follows all of the discipline of pratimoksha, if this basic renunciation of samsara, this disgust and turning away from samsara isn't there, we can't call it pratimoksha. And in the same way in the Mahayana teachings, if the mind isn't right, if the motivation or the mentality which underpins whatever we're doing is not correct, then we can't call it Mahayana. So in this case, at the beginning of the talk, then Rinpoche says, we are now going to study Dharma with the intention of bringing all sentient beings, our mothers, throughout the vast limits of space to the state of utterly pure, totally perfect, and most precious enlightenment. And that should be the way that we enter into Dharma teachings or practice, that is to say, and then afterwards that should be the underlying feeling in our minds, so that when we are, for instance, just now studying the Dharma teachings, then that's how it should be. Our mind should be out there in loving care for all sentient beings, without any limit, actually, through wherever there's space there are beings, and it's for their benefit that we are listening to these teachings and trying to understand them and to implement them. If it's like that, then as we sit here, we're practicing Mahayana. If it's not like that, and we're sitting here studying out of intellectual curiosity for our own benefit, it's not bad, it's still a good thing, but we cannot call it Mahayana. We can't call it Bodhisattva in practice.
내가 나로서 샤제 전번라고 지라서 노동나 다 고롱 주 고롱에서 노동나 대파 당제가 다리 다 연례 당제가 다리 노다는 로버 송지 전에 이거 충고를 받선 거 바래디 대 당제가 다 뒤산다고도 쳐디고 바래 얘나용 나로 그 연례 시동 마시나 다 뒤파 쳐 바래 얘나는 샤제 전번 연례 시 딘디 시디라 나로 송지지 제 딘디 연례 시나 더 샤제심보 말이 더 냐디고 추리 마로 송지리 세디디라 대인디디라는 샤제심보때 공소가 냐란 시 마기 발라 때니 되니 미 냐디고 추니도 보고 말이 대이나 가송아 라야 대바 오마 동보요 거 말이 더 미도 이거 아니 디디도라 고마고마 홍거 말이 라 말이 대인디 샤제심보 냐란 시 캔라 대바 오마다 저 이거 그 디도니 냐란 시거 말이 되면 오마 메니 고마 마스바리.
For instance, the Mahamudra teachings, which are part of this course, we probably already know that the Mahamudra teachings are, of all of the Dharma teachings, they're the very finest. Mahamudra practice of meditation, of all meditation practices, it is the very, very top. It's the ultimate. Mahamudra teachings is totally based on the third turning of the wheel of Buddha Dharma, and of the three turnings, that is the most sublime, it's the ultimate of teachings. We know that the teaching is the highest, but if we are following those teachings, studying them, practicing them for our own benefit, just for our own welfare, then although that's the highest of views and practice, actually our own practice and our own attitude is that of the Shravakas. It's that of the basic level of Buddhism, because the motivation is self-interest. And of course, it's something, it's good. And Rinpoche explained yesterday that if you don't have the first floor of a building, then you can't have the second floor and the third floor. We can't say it's a bad thing, but we should understand that this state of mind with which we are entering into something, with which we are doing something, is really what determines its quality and its level.
Ni lama chi mongbo tian yo ni zopa chenpo kyun sha ja chenpo kyun se den la na yo pya do mendu pe na ne pan da wo ji na da wa ji la me ho no song me su kha ja pe hyo mongbo ro song dong yu den de de na ne du re mo man da wo di cho de na a nga me ba de he de pya do mendu la de ma nga man pe de dan ji la mendu a pe den da wo re den yin de la na ga ro so lo kha rong dong chu to mo do de la song dong yan mendu nyom ba la son dong du nga la pya thong go so man du nyom ba chong ron du ta da la son dong na de ni chu tu bi dong go chu nyan la si bi dong go nji ba de ni ha go du.
As far as the actual practitioner is concerned, that means us, then we need to be very to the point and very realistic about what our practice is achieving. And for this, we shouldn't be looking at the number of years we've been practicing. We shouldn't be looking at the teachings we've received. We shouldn't be looking at the lamas in whose presence we've received blessings and teachings and so on. What we need to look at is our own mind. It doesn't matter if we've been practicing for 20 years, 30 years, if we've received teachings on Mahamudra, on Dzogchen, how long we've been doing it, which great masters we did it with. What we should be looking at is this. Is my desire and attachment getting less? Is my anger getting less? Is my confusion and ignorance getting less? Are the defilements diminishing? That's what we should be looking at. We should be measuring our Dharma not in terms of years, not in terms of teachings and teachers, but in terms of the changes of our own mind. And it's as simple as that. If our defilements and ego clinging are diminishing, then the Dharma we're practicing Dharma properly. If not, the rest doesn't matter. Who you've been with, what teachings you've taken, however profound or special, makes no difference. So there we can take an example of somebody who's sick and who goes to hospital. Now it doesn't matter if they stay 1 day, 1 week, 1 month in the hospital, if they receive injections, drips, whatever treatment it is. If in the end they're getting worse and worse and worse, well, it doesn't matter. They're getting worse and worse and worse. That's the main thing.
더 가린다 오리라나는 대화도 동안 용지도 시마인 바 다 가송하라이 생기 바인 바 농이 동아용 마롱거 생기 뒤도니 쇼군데 대화용 마롱거 생기 뒤도니 쇼군데 대 하고니 다 디디도라 동아 통지 매버시 대화 통지 윤시 다타 토모 마인 바 제바든 봐봐 다 쇼제 전부 다 들리지 말해.
I forgot to say at the end of the last one. So this means that we need to understand the real point of Dharma, the real meaning, which is this reduction of suffering and development of happiness. So from that point of view, Dharma is a remedy. It's a medicine. It's a remedy for our defilements, our poisons, our passions, and it's that also which nurtures and increases our happiness by the very fact of taking away the obstacles and the suffering and the confusion in our mind. Dharma is the remedy, and of all the different sorts of Dharma, then Mahamudra practice is the finest remedy of them all. It really is the very best. And through it, we understand that these problems that we're tackling, our anger and passion and so on, ego clinging, and also that the happiness that we are seeking, that they have no solid foundation. They are not real entities in themselves. They all, as we saw yesterday, as Rimte explained yesterday, they are all facets of the mind. They are the activity, the manifestation, the radiance of the mind. And by that very fact, once we understand the mind and how it makes happiness and suffering, then we have the method for changing it, and of all the methods, Mahamudra is really the finest and most efficient and sophisticated.
대다와도 사제 첨부터 리 라보지레면디 대 모텔레도 몬톤도 가지도 녀란 세결레도 대반종오지 동하통지 메로지지 리 라보지 말에 베나 마론소 손노지 동나 못통지 록나루니 로달라로 효바레 로 녀히 가시 지레마송 바들라나 다 로로 동보니 토르로다 용나나 긴주로다도 기바 로 된디시 효바레 달라나 로지 말이 니 말이 로 여림보 바들라 칼리제 거바레 대용 효케니 공도 베칼리 치모제 거바레 카타마 하고바레 디 미게데 가리미 효레지나 나롱 센들라 대봉우지 레카야 보라지 배혀 몸보다 드지지 지 무슨 찍어서 놓은 돈이 로쳐서 몸보라 깔리지 로조시 교바래 된디지 로조 세거나 나로서 취세지다 세지 말이 세니 말이 시와 몸부 바가 레카지래 대이나 로조 세 먹어 봐 강아지 먹어 봐 띠리라보지 레사면도야 나로서 쏘는 돈나 근데 무슨 찍어 강아라 나로서 로쳐서 몸보라 강아지 근도야 로조 세 근도야 대용 디 로조가 팬토 뭐도 다 남마다 몸보시와래 텐다고 지강아지 거나 나로 무슨 몸을 내가라 디 강아지 먹어 봐 돈이 대반주 동하 면도지도 돈이 갖고 와지 대 혼스사면도야 나로서 쏘는지 돈거나 대고 여기 쏘는지 돈나 하고 천실인도야 근데 이나용 샤제 첨부 대용 리라보지 고가지도 리라보지 레모드.
The principle is simple. The practice is difficult. It really is not easy. It's not easy to get to a point of recognizing the nature of mind. The actual practice of Mahamudra, we cannot say it's a simple, easy thing to do. It involves many things, difficulty, courage, and so on. And Rinpoche gives us an example. He says, well, looking at a regular person's life, from the age of 5 till about 20, we are being educated. You start with primary school, you have to learn the alphabet, letter by letter, gradually you work up. step by step until at the end you go to university. It's not possible at the beginning for a child that's done 1 year of study to go and do PhD type research. It's just not possible. There's no equipment, there's none of the basis, not even after 2 years or 3 years. This is something that builds up. Gradually you learn to read and write, to enter into the details of things, to take that more deeply, more finely. And then, after 15 years of study, then on all of that basis, then you can have the sort of mind and capacities for doing doctorate type research. And then once that's been done, then after all of those years of development, then you're equipped to earn a living, to make your money, to support yourself for the rest of the life. In regular existence, we're willing to go through all of that laborious education for all of those years because that's what enables us to survive. Without that, you're pretty stuck. And so now that's just for ordinary life. Here we're not looking at one life or 2 lives. We're looking at something for all of our future lives. We're looking at something that is going to conquer all of those deep-rooted problems, clinging to self and so on. We're looking at something which is going to engender the finest of all happiness. This is not an easy task. This is a long term. This is a difficult task. But then, if we're prepared to undergo 15 years of laborious, boring education just in order to survive and stay alive without any guarantee that it's going to work, that you're going to get a job, that you're going to actually make it, then we should be prepared for the hardship of working with the mind, which is the necessity of Mahamudra practice.
Ta donana kong tar jong ta ngaro so khatswa diwan do ban danyore dunga mando ba khatswa dabare tinina na ta dunga ko nyambo donana be kong ta ta xeni ta ji nyone xie ka do ko do mare ya ta de xie di de la na ta xue je qian bo la xi xia ge ta khatswa nga xie re chen dang zhe wo de zhuo song ta xue xian la huang zhu ngui ge ji de 다 넘바 상자고 요래 다 쇼제 첨보 면나 시샤가 레카 공도 공다베 이나요 된다고 요래 동보 자디세 거래 레카시 샤바 자체부질이나 베나 가로서 다라 콩발리레 콩발리디 디라나 다다니 자디세 에 누가 된다고 그래 다 황종을 라나 노나는 운이 말이 되냐나요 다 자디디 야보지 소나 운이 다 콤발리지 통하라 리하보지 요바래 자디디 야포지메 잘라데 야포지메나 콤발을 빼갈리 가버래 리터시 된다고 인디라 황로데 야포지 요나 응기라 빼패도 전부 요래 되니 콤발리 차나용 다 대라니 개자도 돈은 야포지 요거래 된다고디 지세 다 너나는 황로도 응기 지세 다 너나는 샤바지도 덤바 레카지도 된다고
We already understood yesterday something painfully obvious. There's nobody who wants suffering, and everybody wants happiness. And so now we know, we've understood that Mahamudra is the finest of all ways to eliminate suffering and to achieve happiness. Then, and in the light of what Rinpoche just said about what we're prepared to do in ordinary life, then we should be motivated to do whatever we can to make it a reality, to practice it as much as possible and as well as possible. As far as the practice of Mahamudra goes, then it's presented in 3 main steps: preparation, actual practice, and what follows on from that. And this is the way the text is presented, it's the way that practice works. And it's really the same for most things in life. We need to prepare, then we need to actually do something, and then on the basis of what's been done, there are certain consequences that follow on from that. And if we take the example of building a house, then first we need to plan it, to design it, and not just plan the house itself, but plan the building work and how it's going to be done. However well the planning's done, then that well the building work will be done, and the actual building will be a success. It will be useful or not so useful. And so there's the planning. The planning's gone well, then the actual building happens, and the house is there. And then, once the house is there, then it can be lived in. So these 3 steps of preparing, actually doing, and then working with the consequences, or the conclusion of that, is a very natural thing, and it applies in particular to Mahamudra. However well the preparation is done, then that well the actual practice will succeed. So, in the preparation for Mahamudra, we actually have 3 preparations, 3 stages of preparation. The first is called the common preparation or foundations, common in the sense of shared. The second is called the uncommon foundations or preparation. And the third is called the particular preparation or foundation. Common, uncommon, particular. There are those 3. And again, we can use an everyday example to demonstrate that. If we go back to this example of building a house, then the general preparation would be, well, you need to get your plot of land, you need to get the money or to get the loan, you need to establish the general circumstances that make the whole thing possible. Then, once you've got the money, a piece of land and so on, then what will correspond to the uncommon foundations are that you need to get the workers and the equipment, the materials, especially for that house. And so then, whatever it's being built of, marble or so on, you need to get what you need to build that house. It might not be the same as what the neighbour needs to build his house. But then the third type of particular foundation or preparation is you need some experts. So you might need someone who's a skilled metal worker, for instance, who can do the wrought iron work, or you might need somebody who is a specialist for, pick your trade, but your own house might have a very special features, and there you need someone who's particularly skilled in that. Not just any building worker or your regular workers can do it. So in Mahamudra we have the common foundation, uncommon foundations, and very special foundations.
Tesama Yonayong, that give out the Yapushi, Yapuchon. Do you know what she wanana? Do not see Dupochon. Legendary. Then you Dupochosuna, Dupini Tongelana, Dungamatu, Diameva, Kova. That the D said de la no Basonji Pichuch, just said the Yabuhako do, the Gong do, the Tomonda would it, that in our motto, be pick out the pig of our.
So, in this analogy of building a house, then first we have to get the money together, have to have the wealth to do it. And in Mahamudra, we need to practice the common foundations, common because they're common to all of Buddhism. They're shared with all other Buddhism. We need this wealth of attitude, whereby we understand just how precious an opportunity our precious human existence is, how rare, how so many factors come together within that to help us. Also, we need to understand that this precious human existence is impermanent. We are mortal, and to understand the nature of change, and in particular our own death and mortality. We need to know that there isn't just this life, that there are future lives, and that those future lives hinge upon what we do now. If we practice what is good, what is wholesome and virtuous now, then the future life will be full of positive circumstances. If we practice what is harmful now, then the future life will be full of pain and difficulties. Then, so we need to know about karma in this life. And then fourthly, we need to know just what is in store for beings, for ourselves, in the various states of existence. We need to understand very fully the nature of each type of existence and the suffering that it carries. These contemplations which change the mind are the common currency of all Buddha Dhamma.
Then that Tomo Mahimbare, that Tomo Mahimbada, Garedo Tomo Mahimbare de la Nana, that Nomba Sonji be noni, Shira, Shivare. Bena Nyantun Rao don that Tomo Mahimbada which are the opere. Nyantun Raola, that the Tomo Mahim being Hondo Tata, Ganjamandu, the Chimachagan. Bena Garoso, Shantuka Salina Yon, Nyantula Dojichu Ganjamandu, Lama Ganjamandu. Oya doji pomo yodan ganji mundu ta dedo deda ba donano ganju go ganji mundu sonji go deda ba khare du sonji ngunzan se khare nda mare deni sonji ngun zasa manda dudila di songyi chu da yong ngunzan se manda ba chog mare de Chu Mandava Chondo di Tela, de Nyasalan can gain the Mandava Choware. Dongoni Desuchi Titolano Yale Ware. Dozo di Telano, Donano, Temedo Tomo Maimba, Teshan Nyasalan Chodo Bare. The Nina, Shonji Sayon, Gonzado Tati Goyon, Nyatula Serum Mere. Then you do Jesamba, Laminajo, Tata Katon. 돈은 개바 침비추로 그래도 더거 되니 테면 냐디도 되니 더 많이 봐 개바 침비추래 되어 봐래 더거 더 많이 발라 봐래.
The second type of preparation or foundation work that we do is called uncommon, in the sense of not shared with other Buddhists. It's not something that all Buddhists do. So, for instance, when we go through those foundations, even at the beginning, when we take refuge, which is something that all Buddhists do, we take refuge in the style of Mahayana. We don't take refuge in the same way that the Shravakas do, that is done in the Hinayana. We take refuge visualizing Buddha Vajradhara. That's not what all Buddhists do. We have this particular understanding of Vajradhara, the different kayas, and then we take refuge in the Buddha surrounded by, we take refuge in the gurus, which is not what all Buddhists do. Gurus of the lineage. We take refuge in the Yidams, in Vajravarahi, and so on, which is very specific to this lineage. Even when we take refuge in the Buddhas, the hosts of Buddhas are not the same as all Buddhists see it. They have one historical Buddha or several Buddhas, not these hosts, vast cloud hosts of many Buddhas. The Dharma we take refuge in is the Mahayana Dharma. It's not the Dharma that all Buddhists agree to. And the Sangha that we take refuge in is the Bodhisattva Sangha as well as the other Sangha. So, and then also after that, on that basis, then we do the Vajrasattva practice of purification, which is very specific to Mahayana, Vajrayana practice. We do the mandala offering. We do the whole thing on the basis of bodhicitta. This is not something that's shared with all Buddhists. This is specific to Mahayana, specific to our lineage.
Pena ngarozo kumbali ba tabala ta me de mronwa jalo bombo yo bare leka yembala magaba dendawo donano tumo mayempa donano tepa chimbu chunyon sena de ngondo ni pa jen de gajire
me tu meroma sena
ta te mena donano mandiba.
So this is, if we go back to our analogy of building a house, then given the sort of house that we want to build, these are the sort of things, the preparation work that you can't do without. Yeah, that you can't do without. So depending on the sort of house you've got, if you didn't do it, you couldn't build that sort of a house. Sorry, it's a couple of negatives, but it's what you need to do in order to do it. And if you didn't do it, you couldn't do it.
다 제파진 황도래.
맞죠?
다 제파진 황도도 세제도 다 니노라 테파 첨부 제로 다 쇼제 첨부 녀란 신开了 다 너면의 쇼제 첨부 모두 봐. 요나 고로 다죠 면나 대면나 다 쇼제 첨부 모두 봐. 고로 그 황도 운다고 쇼되어 봐래. 배나 콤발리 발라 잘로 가기면은 콤발리다 메봐. 드리 잘로 요 봐래. 배 된다고 then we
come on to the third type of foundation, which is the particular or most special foundation, or you could almost say customized foundation. It's particular to Mahamudra itself. It's a foundation, set of foundations, that if you don't do, you can't practice Mahamudra. You just don't have the equipment that's necessary. So if in building our house, this might be if you can't get a certain type of material, then you just can't build it how you want. If you can't have a certain very skilled craftsperson, then you can't make that very special feature on the house that distinguishes it.
다 기차기 된디시나 두소 문두 두소로로 제문두 가로서 두소 통수레디 단도 두두시세나 노다나 라마 지바도 지바지 건두다 황도도 따라 가서 다 계지매 제바지 황도고 노니 미라나 지안게시 해줘와 지안게가 노니 조는 다 도천이 링이 도보 다디 저는 드리번 중알라 다 온세바 고 드리번 운이 조지다 디 도천한테 见 你把这写完了等你研把这地弄完都呀他等于了工作级别了嘛是他见一个弄完都不见搞这里有把的他得了对把的他七八斤黄肉看从的
Now, in this particular course, we don't have the time to go through every feature of this text, and although the foundations are all so important, then there's something you've had teachings on. But if we focus on this very particular set of foundations, which may not be so familiar, then it consists of 4 conditions, which are called causal condition, master condition, focus condition, and immediate condition. And we can sum all of those up in one of them, which is called the master condition, which means that we absolutely have to have, for Mahamudra, a truly qualified lineage guru.
다 대라는 배나는 가로서 다 로다길에 소나용 다 개개 야부지요나 배 로줄라 배도 진보요래 개개 야부지면나 로줄라 강아배 배도 싫어요 마봐 배 대인라고 지대인디 대라나 다 라마 생지도 대바지요나 대 쇼제 제모녀 살량케라 배 배도 진보요 바래 다 라마 생지도 대바지 가린다고 지글레 소나는 다 나로비 라마 생지 지바된 소 라마 생지는 지바도 대바 자와 도진총 다 자와 도진총제나 다 송지 가져 타바리 노다 송지라 다 추고롱 그쪽에서 뭐 세조리 되는다 롱크고 넘바 템바도 다 노나나 도진총 라바리 특히 넘바 템지들 가져 타바시리 미도도 마다바도 노나 푸지리 다티 데니미 제니 다다라 투마선 지바들 제바 야보주요 봐 제바 요새제도 맞아 롱장지도 다 된지 제가 지가 패면도 달라는 제바 용도 바지 라면도 근데 가리라고 지거를 라나는 라마 고마디 너무 마루바 카 총아 타카 총아 로마들라 송 강동 양래 제동 디 로마디 용 디 고로장도 튀로장 다 고장지 고유장지 마연바 디 로마디오 녀란시 라민송아다도 로마디오 또 하고 되니 라마도 로마발라 용가요 메 동지베 좀마 다 든리지라너 되니 제바도 된바 라리마도 되이 가로서 지 론다고지마 동 너나 동 고나다 메나다 다 든리 길라라리 말이 배나 가로서 셔지체 뭐 먹고 바리 레티 가로서 라마노 다 파제 제바도 덴바 몽치아 딘지리 라라 제바도 덴 요리메리 하고메 고히메레 다 몽치아 가로서 라마 야보이나 제바도 덴바리 레티 라마라 제바 덴알리 덴 나리 제바 덴바데 나롱라 롤리리 나 제바도 덴바지 시에나 라미 송타타 야보치 하고 근데 하고 하마지 녀라 야보치 시에근데 대 녀라 야보치 덴 라미 또 판다고지 나롱고 또 소나 되니 문이 나 제바도 덴바레는데 되면 나로 그 고지 그 나제바도 대바레면 나마도 제바도 대바 인지레데 나로 제바도 대바 지세서나 라미 주송제다 나로 그냐 디 냠바송지 마임바 생라이거 디 라미 또 바가리나도 또나 나로라도 또다 드니레로 디 드니 운이 나로 제바도 대바레 더 마도 라마도 제바 대바 코에 또 온도 자네 나로 디노로 로타만디 베 대라고 인디라 라마다 다 가리라고 지거디라 나나 노나노 공이 디 로마텔라 타 맹어 가리요나 가정와송 디고 기 고정지도 튀정지도 마여바 코롱거 녀란시 니 운이 동도송지 지라나 된 라미 자니 지바된 세지다 된지라 고도 다터 베가지도
What does it mean, a guru who is truly endowed with the, I can't remember the words I said before, properly qualified guru? Truly qualified lineage guru. Yeah. Anyway, what does that mean, truly qualified lineage guru? And Naropa tells us that truly qualified means possesses the lineage transmission. Possesses the lineage transmission from Buddha Vajradhara. Possesses the lineage transmission from Buddha Vajradhara. Buddha Vajradhara is the way we talk in our lineage about the Buddha, Buddha mind, Buddha. It's the Sambhogakaya aspect of the Buddha. Our historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, was a Nimanakaya aspect of the Buddha, Buddha mind. There's absolutely no difference between them. It's a question of manifestation, time and place. And so these teachings of Mahamudra were given by the Sambhogakaya aspect, Buddha Vajradhara, in the first place. And this transmission is not like the transmission of a lung, where somebody just says it, another person gets it, they've got it, they can tell it to somebody else. That's a mechanical thing. This is so different. This is a transmission of achievement, and it needs to be perfect, and it needs to be unbroken. So this means that what happens is that the original masters who had this from Sambhogakaya Buddha, Vajradhara, they taught it to their disciples. They taught all of the methods for attaining it. They gave them all of the oral instruction, the personal instruction, the profound, heart-to-heart, person-to-person advice. On the basis of that, the person practiced the method. On the basis of that, the bond between master and disciple was never spoiled. The samaya was always perfect. And then the disciple achieved realization and nurtured that realization until it was the same as the master's realization. This is what is meant by transmission. There is absolutely no mistake about it. The master and the student end up identical, and the student has acquired what the original Buddha, Vajradhara, transmitted. This goes from generation to generation. Now, there are many wonderful teachers. There are many teachers who can talk about Mahamudra. But those who actually possess this living transmission of mastery, those who have what Naropa called, who have the lineage from Buddha Vajradhara, are few and far between. There are many masters who teach, but of those who really have this inner transmission are few. And so Rinpoche is saying, if a teacher was to say, I have the lineage transmission, it means not that they've studied, not that they've understood the words, not that they received the empowerments, not that they just received a technical transmission, but that they received the instruction, the method, the oral advice, they practiced, they kept their samaya perfect, and on the basis of that, all of that, their realization became the same as their own authentic guru's realization, and they received the totality of the transmission, just as Buddha Vajradhara gave it in the first place. Somebody who's done that can say, I hold the lineage, I hold the transmission. And those who can say that are few, because it's not a question of study, it's not a question of anything except practice of meditation until the result is fully manifest.
Lomala Nyantuk Chebarjan Trantaba the Takiraji Konjin in the Ganton Tata Dixon Dimandu and the Dizogana, and the Dizena Yapuyore say that he can catch. That the Nichogu. Mato Tacho Gondo Gonda Trilla Gonda, the Nachi Loma Tagonto Hamon, the Tacho Gondo, the Latilla Dena Tenicia, Tantucia Madu. Tacho, the Nizogana, and the Rion, the Nidicina, Yapuyore, and Donana, Roma Gantonti, Hirachi, Donana, Yaputi, Yenje, Hipachi, that the Niki, Dona Yogudu, the Yonana, the Ni, Donana, Shaja Chambuko, that Mondo Katwa the Tatala, to Dugana Tondu, Maru.
Such a teacher, by the very fact of what they carry within them, will know how to nurture experience and realization in their disciples. They'll have the wisdom that knows to tell them what to do, when to do, how to do it. And they won't just be passing on instructions that they got, and then they're passed on, and then just hope that the student makes the best of it. it's not like that. They'll have the wisdom and the insight to nurture that person, so that it's a very true and real thing. The person is growing in the understanding and experience. The experiences will happen. The master can check them, can nurture them, and through those experiences then the wisdom of realization will emerge. Now we've got a 40-second break to change the CD. Kolojur.
다 대다버거 다 논하는 초제 첨부 처토 투바야 보시 니노 통제 된디 시도이나요 논하는 마거나 배도 문디 가르레 지나는 송지전된디 동복고 빈도리 용도 송지 땜바는 투바상지 먼저 용도비 송지 땜바도 투상지 그린로 아르디나 레히오바 마리스 동복고 분도오노라 된디송 바리 대인이라 알아서 주 고장지도 투장지 그 문제 바리지나 대용지 문디 너나는 더 거야 보지 근데
Forgot to say before, Rinpoche said that in his opinion, then this one point from those four particular preliminaries, the master condition it's called, where one needs a truly qualified lineage guru, he says this in a way sums up all of the foundation practices to his mind. That's what it all boils down to, finding and working with a true guru. So then that lineage guru can properly guide and nurture the experience in the student. And it says in one of the scriptures, the Gandavyuha scripture, sutra, that it is not through study alone that the excellent result is attained. Something like that. It's not through study alone that the excellent result is attained. One needs to practice. And so the guidance of the teacher is not a guidance in all of the wealth of scriptures and ideas. It is a guidance in practice, in meditation.
주도 첨본도리 다 가리송원을 라나너 까바 몸부 받더라 더니 투바도 쌈바 시바위 다 녀마길라 다 강자비 소노치와리 송바 다 가리레디나 곰발라 땡니 시와동 쳐와라 수비 눈가 말루바테 통지 파 메버시지더나 좀버시지더나 더니너 띵인데 지나라 강 데리 띵인데 디니라나 여림부 투바시바이 다 연투도지 강시비 평치와야 소모리.
There's another sutra which is called the Ushnicha Sutra, or the Head Mound Sutra, and there it says that better than many cosmic eons of study and contemplation is one day of actual samadhi, actual meditation, absorption. There's a profound difference in time. It says many kalpas, many cosmic eons of study and reflection, they are surpassed by simply one day of true absorption. And the reason for this is that all of the intellectual work of study and reflection is feeble in overcoming the mind's poisons and defilements and ego clinging, so on. Whereas one day of profound absorption is effective in removing those things.
다 대용 안가로 관질이 시 대대는 지면도 돈보도 관질이야 뭐 하고 그 말에 되면 하마고나 관나 용 대비 전부 먼저 말에 관마히나 대도 지면도야.
That's very true, but then again, you need to know how to meditate. You need to have some information first so that the meditation goes the right way. Otherwise, no benefit. Otherwise, you can plonk yourself down and do some Vajrayana meditation and no benefit. Difficult, isn't it?
다게 강텔라는 다 송지 전에 이거 도공파 nin제노니 다 가르쳐 올리지나 다 니년트노도 니 형식 삼바노도 대기기바 탐제라 다 띵인자 먼저가 몸보요레스 옛나요 다 네 뒤가나 띵자 탐제的다 예니도 랑동이라 주대베레스 도공파 nin제노라 다 띵지 송오레
도공파
nin제노라
nin제
라 노니 가리송 원래지나 니 에다 년투도 형식 삼바도 니 대기기바 탐제라 띵자 먼저바 다 모송레 연나용 다탄지니 취도 되고나 다 가르라나너 기니도 랑통데 다 넘바 니르 되바레.
There's another scripture which is called the that which explains the true intention of the Buddha, something like that. The sutra which explains the true intention. I don't know the Sanskrit name. And in there it says there are just so many different sorts of meditations. There are the meditations of the Shravakas, there are the meditations of the Bodhisattvas, there are the meditations of the Buddhas. But all of those vast amounts of meditation can be resumed as two things: shamatha and vipassana, peaceful stabilizing and profound insight.
다 대인들이라는 드니 손제 전대들라 지니 다 희니 그저 다 가린다고 지리 방통 그저 다 가린다고 지리 세 다 지지 가리레스 손제 전대들라 지디디라 드니 손제 전대들 그 희니 그저다는 드니 차참레스 드니 방통 그저는 다 뒤바도 쏜바 노는 히라레스 뭐야 드니 차참메나 희니 먼저 봐도 뭐야 뒤바메나 랑통 먼저 봐 너는 진이데 들리니 말이.
And then the way that the Buddha defines in that sutra the nature of shamatha and vipassana, of stable peace and deep insight, is through the basis that gives rise to them. The basis that gives rise to shamatha, to peaceful stability, is right conduct, discipline. The basis which gives rise to vipassana, deep insight, is study and reflection, or more properly, the wisdom of study and the wisdom of reflection. Without this control and discipline and pure conduct that's required for the practice, then we can't get the results of shamatha. Without first having studied and reflected upon those studies and developed that sort of wisdom, then the very deep wisdom of meditation cannot arise.
다 저러나 당하로서 dansehiyo pare 다 지가서라 너는 루뭐 여선 당지 너는 dancer 디노닐 해와래.
As for the first one, the cause which gives rise to shamatha, then this is what we're studying in the other aspect of this course. It's all based in the way that we support or discipline our mind through commitment, through vows. And as we've seen, this training of the mind And this harnessing of the mind works in three areas: harnessing the body, harnessing the speech, harnessing the mind.
Deni langtong da langtong na da tupadong donana sombala so ba se gawari sonje te da ri ra wo yore ji na da ngaro so khieran da du dendi zo de le dino thangje dong ji de malu ba de thangje la donana nya da la tu song xie da dendi se dong ji yore deni ji na da gari re dina na la mi mengo la dian ni zo san ge di tu la deni sunin ru se la so ba zai je ni sha la tu ba ma je ba no san ge di tu la tu ba xie ni da gari re wo ji jin ri re ge de san di tu la kan no de ko ni deni donana na guo lan do di da ni ra wo yo re dino ni da xua jia qian bo ra wo zuo na tu ba jia jie bo ma je ba da no san ge di tu ni da donana hira xie ni de la guo ya bu ju hong da ni
As for the second aspect, the learning and the reflection that gives rise to deep insight, then in fact there are two ways traditionally of developing such learning and reflection. The first way takes place through study, and traditionally in the monasteries and so forth, there will be the Shedra, the monastic college, and there will be study of all the various aspects of the Buddha's teaching, the various, it's called the Pitaka, the various the Hinayana teachings, the Mahayana teachings, the different philosophical traditions, how they present them, the main points of Buddha Dharma concerning the sutras, concerning the tantras. So there's a study program of the Shedra, and through that there is a very thorough training, study and reflection that then becomes the basis for the vipassana, so that when you meditate on the basis of everything you've learned, there's the insight. The other way is based on the Lama's the Guru's personal instructions. And there one's wisdom comes from person to person, heart to heart advice. It's by taking that advice to heart, reflecting upon it, that one gains the wisdom about mind itself in particular, which becomes the basis for profound insight into the mind. So it's not teachings from the Lama about all different sorts of things. It's teachings very specifically about your own mind and the way it works, and wisdom comes on that basis. In Mahamudra, both of these are used, but the main emphasis is on the second one, on taking to heart the Guru's instructions and using that as the basis for the insight that comes in the practice.
Denina hini de karinda wo yore, rangdo de karinda wo yore lana, hini de da sen zeji de ni ba la guo ren do zu na, nong do mo chuo ba. Sen zeji de ni ji ta lan be ni, sen zeji de ni ba la de hini la. Rangdo de xie ji de karinda wo ji lu guo ge ren ji na, sen zeji ge ni yo ji ge di sen de. Ko ro rong ge ni se dong ga ri ji yo de yin na, di rong ye yin ba ha guo ji de lan, rangdo la ba ri. Ding di de la da hi去对对些呢，些年都浪头你，记得三这几的你吧，记得三这几个你有就三的，可能容易搞的这就呢还过去的，他对你了浪头，对你对的，些年都浪头你去对呢，对你绕起来。
Those things we just studied are the basis from which arise shamatha and vipassana. What are they? Shamatha and vipassana. First, let's look at shamatha, this, however you like to call it, calm abiding, peaceful stability of the mind. We can define it as the mind which is settled one-pointedly. The mind which is settled one-pointedly. So it needs to settle, that means to be stable and calm, and it needs to be focused, settled one-pointedly. As far as vipassana is concerned, deep insight, then this concerns that settled focused mind. Once it is focused and settled, then how is that mind? What is the nature of that mind? It's insight into the nature of mind and the very way the mind is.
Ta te nyonlan shi pika la ta tombo hini gang ga ba rezon tombo lantong gang ga ba re la na. Ta ombo yonra ina hini gang ga mandu. Karre jina hiya mombu pa dara kono gandi shebi ko. Tado sona mombu du. Teni ina ne kono lantong. Ngon cho ba tong nyandal gang kona jandu du. Teni ra ina hini mama gang ga mandu lantong chung chung du. Re de ta ombo chome pama katsuma teni re mandu. Teni ina na tombo hini hwa do go re. De do gazi ge jen ra wo da ta kari ra wo so re jina na jasi hiwa le. Ta hini ra de den bi lantong ki hini do den bi lantong da teni nyam mo pe da ma lu ba de thong ji chang ta ba re so re. Ta de yin di de la na tombo teni hini nya ya bu ji gam so teni so ba re. De yin de la di ko ra do den ba shi ni ta ga ro so katsuma ga nyonla ji de tombo hini ga teni lantong ga ta teni che yo ba re. Di ko ra do teni da wo re.
Excuse me. In terms of practice, then, which comes first of shamatha and vipassana? Well, it depends. It depends on the capacity of the, what should we call it, the disciple, the person. Those exceptional beings who are what are called the very best, they might not need to do, well, the very, very best, any shamatha first. They can go straight to the vipassana, deep insight. Or they might need to do very little shamatha, very little peaceful stability meditation, because on account of all of their past history, on account of the natural sparkling openness and wisdom of their minds, then the nature of mind can be pointed out by a truly qualified guru, and then on that basis they can nurture that deep insight. So there would be no need, no point putting that person through the labours of shamatha first, if there is such a person. Such a person is exceedingly rare. So for the most part of people, we start with shamatha, because the great master Shantideva says this. He says, vipassana, which is well endowed with shamatha, has the power to overcome every defilement. Vipassana, which is well endowed with shamatha, has the power to overcome every defilement. So we start with shamatha, we build up a very peaceful, stable mind, and that becomes the basis for deep insight into the mind.
Ta te yin de la thoma hini nga ro so gang du. Ta hini je gang du la ta hini gang je la na ta nga ro so lu dong san de da ni ra wo ji nga ro zi ki yo ra. Te yin de ni la tombo lu de ga che bo ren du. Ta te yin de la na tombo lu yo ta la dian ni de ni san la pe do yo ba re.
When it comes to the actual practice of meditation, for the actual practice of shamatha, which is probably the case for all of us, then meditation involves both body and mind. And one needs to know what to do with the body and what to do with the mind. And these two are not totally separate. Body and mind are indeed very connected. And so what is the connection? The connection is that when the body is well set in meditation, when it's comfortably positioned, then the mind will naturally feel at ease. It will be easier to work with the mind. It will be easier to cultivate peaceful stability within the mind. If the body is uncomfortable, poorly positioned, then this makes the mind disturbed and uncomfortable.
Then lu yong ta de da zo ma ru yong zhe xian nan ne lu no nu qu dang se. Da de zu ki yo ba de. Da no nu qu de se ji de da nang ban nong zhe se la ji gen chen de. Di yu ta la da yu dong ko rong qu dang tang ba yo de. De he di mi de da ba xie ni song ji ji gen chen nang ban nong zhe se yo ji de di yu ta la ma zhe ji la yo ji de tong mu de no ta di yu ta di yu ta de qu dang cong de yo ba de de da wo nga rong su xian de yin na yong pen du yo yo ba de.
As far as putting the body into an ideal posture is concerned, an ideal position, ideal posture, then most famous of all in these teachings is what is called the 7-point posture of Vairochana. Vairochana is the name of one of the 5 main Buddhas, of the 5 Buddha families. And so when we portray Vairochana, then we're looking around, can't see one just in the shrine room here, but then Vairochana has these 7 points of posture.
Da di no ni ti dong bo qu dang no ni qu dong bo go na de zo ji ye re. De zo ji chen la pa men de. Qu dong bo de. Go na de zo ji chen la ga bo men de.
So 7 points. You might not like the first one.
The
legs should be in the Vajra posture. For most people who grew up sitting on chairs, difficult.
Tombo ka chati do de tilisena ka ka sala do ji chetung ja tenyu ko ma na tilisena yo ka chati ndu ta tilise chele na gon ro yo bare te ko chi do ka le nga ro so gon tilisena ndindu teni do ji chetung u ja ma do na yo san bi chetung du je nga ro so chetung se ta la ma ta no jan din din ya ho ya ta do go yo ta do ji chetung ko do bo ya teni so re te yo 아제 인디디 다 히레 가서 안디 문디디 다 바체 인디디 대다상 다 가르고 고 지나 근데 라는 도지지로 야부지 자터 딩원라에 대해서 인디디지 대다마도나 쳔비지로 다 대다마도나용 다지 거저디 대대도 딘디시나용 대니면 디바 말이.
So that Vajra posture. Well, even if we've been sitting on chairs all of our lives, it's not impossible. So what we can do is sit on a chair, but then get down and sit in the Vajra posture for a little bit. And when the pain means you can't do it anymore, then you can get out of it and sit back on the chair for a while, and then train in a bit more Vajra posture until your knees can't take it, and then sit on the chair for a bit, and slowly, bit by bit, you should find that with the right sort of exercises, it's very achievable. It really is the best. The second best, still quite good, is what some people call the half lotus or bodhisattva posture, where instead of both legs being up like this, then the one leg is underneath. It's a posture that many people sit in. It's fairly accessible, and that's also good. It's not quite so good, but it's also good. And then even sitting cross-legged, not like that, we can't say it's useless. It's still some benefit, but the Vajra posture is really the best.
gong je du tiran du sa de de bo yo na pe pen du sa de ma de pan ro yo na je ro ya po man du de na na ta pe sha no den de so na na jang hwan ni de je ya to na ya bo yo de den de so de ta on la sang ten bi chu se ta nga ro so da bo le du an di ji du wa de ni na ya la yo na pe pen so yo de de la du ma ro da yin na ma sang ten bi chu me de yin na pa te ka da wo yin na ga de bon du de lo du chan de ya de yin na de zhen de ga ga na de zhe ya ri la le wo na de na gong du pa de bo yo pa da nyo yin na ga de bon du de ta ga ri ga na no na de bo du sa ya bo ga chen du.
One needs to experiment with this to find what is actually ideal for oneself as far as the Vajra posture is concerned. Many texts say it can be helpful to have the right height of support under your bottom, so you need to find the right height of cushion or whatever you put there, so that with the right height then you feel that the legs and everything and your back sits comfortably. Sometimes, depending how and where you're sitting, also a little bit of support behind the back can help. These are perfectly admissible, and in fact they're encouraged so that we find the right way for ourselves to sit. Rinpoche says he himself got used to sitting in the Vajra posture on a flat floor, and actually if he puts some support under his bottom, he gets pain after a while. It's not comfortable for him. Each person needs to find the right support.
Ni no to tombori. Ni ba no ta lo pa nyong yo. Si de ho la so gen sang la ta de la nyong ba yo jire. Ta nyong ba yo de la ba yo de ya la si yi de din la si. Ni se de la ti bo ni de de zo ta tu ta de li song du ki cha si na na ni man de de wo do ta la de de si ka yo de nong shu de ta no na no ngaro so de de se ge du mo yan de de se ge de din la.
Watch the hands.
Mo ya de ni de zo te bo ni de ni de zo du ge du.
So second point after the posture of the legs is that of the hands. The hands are placed one upon another in what's called the meditation posture. The palms of the hands themselves sit 4 fingers width below the navel, and then the thumbs are joined, as you just saw Rinpoche joining the thumbs.
Tani no sambare ta samba no pomba go su ta jung la du tira no pomba ni pa de zu jin pie ka xie den de xie gong di pa la long zhuo san zhe wo yo pa xie den de xie gong du ta den de xie ji la ko re.
Third point is to pull back and up the shoulders somewhat, and then this means that with the hands in the meditation posture and the shoulders pulled back somewhat, then there is a gap between the arm and the side of the body. It's enough gap for a bit of wind to pass through.
Teni ga chi song ga chi jinan di chi re chi de ya zhongbo re ge du ti zhongbo re ba xie pa la nga ro so ne di zo ga na ga chi pan gun du ya po ma du ne di xie ji ma du de zo zu ge ye da wo xie ge du de di xie na ga chi de zhongbo ya ro re ne di da wo chi xie di ne na ga chi de pa ja gong gu di yo ki re de di ni di la de zo zu ge ye da wo chi xie ge re de ni de ga chi song du la.
So then the next point, which is point 4, isn't it? Fourth point is the spine. The spine should be straight. The spine should be straight, which means the vertebra should be straight. And it's a bit of a shame as a translation because Rinpoche was showing it as he was talking. So our attention needs to be actually with the spine itself. We need to be thinking of a posture which makes our spinal column as straight as it can be, which doesn't mean Rinpoche was leaning back, exaggerating a leaning back. He says this actually bends the spine. We need to find a position of the head and the neck and so on that means the spine is as straight as it can be.
Teni rinpa yo zang gu song re, rinpa zinan de re, de zo ji zu de la
Then if in the Tibetan it's expressed in terms of the throat is covered up a bit, or we can say the chin is tucked in a little bit. The chin doesn't jut out, it's tucked in a little bit over the throat. So then, as far as the tongue and the teeth and what's happening in the mouth are concerned, then the tongue doesn't hang loose, it touches the upper palate, or it's settled on the upper palate, and the teeth are slightly apart. They're not clenched, they're not very apart, they're just slightly apart, with the tongue parked on the palate above them. As far as the gaze is concerned, then the gaze is settled in space, in indefinite space, some 4 fingers width in front of the tip of the nose. So there's nothing there to look at, it's just the place where the gaze is parked. So a little more than 4 fingers width in front of the nose. Those are the 7 points of posture. Of those 7 points, then perhaps the most important is the gaze, if we look on a longer term. And many people, when they meditate with their eyes closed. It's not good. It's not bad, but it's not good. And Rinpoche said he never saw a Mahayana or a Vajrayana instruction text that said close the eyes. They always talk about the eyes being opened, and then in particular when it comes to the Vajrayana teachings, and especially in the Tibetan traditions, the teachings of the Mahasandhi or Dzogchen, then in there are many instructions about using the gaze, using the eyes to great advantage. The reason for this is that in the energy channels of the body, the eyes are the end point of what are called the 2 pranja, or wisdom channels. And by keeping the eyes shut, one is radically diminishing the possibility of using the energy of those channels to realize the wisdom that transcends self, the wisdom of non-ego. And in the Mahasandhi teachings, then there are many special instructions for using the gaze, where there's a Dharmakaya gaze, Sambhogakaya gaze, Nimanakaya gaze. All of these are very, very advantageous. So although sometimes for a very experienced practitioner, or from time to time for anybody, although it's not a sin to close the eyes, although it can be okay, for the actual meditation training, working with the eyes open is very important. Actually, how to use the gaze is important. First, not a lot of blinking. It doesn't mean not blinking, but Rinpoche was actually fluttering his eyelids very quickly and saying not like that. So not sort of a stroboscopic blinking when you meditate. And also not with the eyes wandering around the room, looking at this, looking at that, settling here, settling there. On the contrary, the gaze should be calmly settled. It shouldn't be not a tight focus, just calmly settled on its object. When the gaze wanders, this is very injurious to development of shamatha. So the posture is very important because it's very helpful for the shamatha. And within the posture, the correct use of the gaze is very important, is a very, very important point. The way that the posture helps the mind is that ideal posture is very helpful for reducing the power and the frequency of thoughts and mental activity in general. It's true that in some ways what we see and what we hear and what we smell and taste and touch and so on does provoke thoughts, but it's not at all as simple as that. Otherwise we just need to close our eyes, block our ears, block up the nose and so on, and then we'd be enlightened. We'd just shut down the sense doors. If it was just the senses that provoked thoughts, then enlightenment would just be simply a case of destroying the senses, which is not the case. and so seeing, and so the eye is open is very helpful.
Ta no chu dang ge tin la nga ro su ka ji bi ji ja yo re da ge je la wo ji de song re ta ji de ga re la na u nga ro la tong chu ra u dra tong ji ba le ma nyan song re u dra me ba ya le ma le se dra yin du de wo ji de ti dra me ba ta ro wa yo do do na u ten jang ge se de la na dra me ba ta ten de se ge re song du de ba ji de ta no chu dam nga ro su ka ji pe la ma ko ma no ge me ngwa de na da u dra me ba ta ten de da wo de je
to those 7 points of posture we can add an 8th, which comes from the oral instructions of the Kagyu tradition, and this is that the breath should be soundless. The breath should be without sound. And so we can't say no heavy breathing because that sounds strange, but it means that the breath should be very, very natural. It shouldn't be something that makes a whistling noise, or a sound as it comes in and out. There should be this, what can we say, gentle, natural breath. This is an 8th feature, not in the traditional 7 points, but through the Guru's oral instructions.
Tilu the saga, theatre and chordina, that near a puma, theatre and chona, Ninga Tabumari, that near a nauna, what is in Ninga Tabundin and near the theatre manana, Tilu the saga, said to Gonji do. The pay catching the Marutina, Pekachi would do.
Also, there's another thing, which Rinpoche says, in my opinion, it's really quite important, is that don't, what's the word? It's not overdressed, that sounds wrong. Not to wear too many clothes when you meditate, because if you're too well wrapped up, you're too warm, then this won't help the meditation. To be more lightly dressed than heavily dressed, he said, 100% one can say that's a better thing. Of course, not to the point where you risk catching a cold or getting sick, or where you're so freezing it's taking your mind off the meditation or whatever. Not to that point, not to the point where it's overdone. But very definitely, if one is, all things considered, lightly dressed for the occasion of meditation, then this is very helpful for the practice.
Yoke Cheso Samala Yalon Gare. Then you talk about the Dila, Ron Hiola Dina, Catalana, good Sichumandu, the Pajechu Mandu, Gosigare, Lama, Carisi, Pegore, the Dina Gojagana, Nola, Yadina Tonkiomara, the Dina Gojagore, the Goja and the Gosigore, then these are children, the Mamere, but they talk, yes, Lama Book and Pulua, Pulama Kadu, Pay on the Ganyan, Lama, Nerakitis, Lama Pendy Pekes, Tondore, Pay Dromaja, Senior Conrad.
Drampolatini, Mane.
Romanda was a
Rinpoche saying when he was about 19 or 20 years old, he was in retreat, and in that retreat they had rather long hours. They were up at 3 a.m, and their day finished around 11 o'clock in the evening. and they had to leave their door open, and there was one Lama whose job it was to go around and to look to make sure that everyone was practicing, and said one evening he'd fallen asleep, and so he was in his meditation box, which was quite small, and he'd dozed off, and the Lama who looked through the door and who saw that he was sleeping when he should have been meditating, came in with a stick of incense, and he put the incense in his mouth as he was sleeping, and he woke up with a start.
Kare dinang hamat lama nga putura. Taja pa ka loss ka pa ka bchi ngon ti me sira lama nga pu ndiri chi ture. Taja tha man loss.
He said he used to have an unusual white hair that grew just on the bottom lip. That got burnt. He's not had it since.
Then that's only no the look got that also then it's only send the got that directly or it. Then you that did so then you try to that. Did you?
So in today's teaching on from the pointing out the Dharmakaya, we have very, very briefly brushed upon the earlier chapters and not done the ones concerning the foundations. As far as settling the body and settling the mind is concerned, we've looked a little bit at settling the body, and tomorrow we come on to settling the mind. And this leaves us with a few minutes for questions, if you have any questions.
He said that we should put our hands 4 fingers below the navel. Do we actually hold them up in midair, or do we somehow support them on our legs?
Namra nangsi chudun ki nangla lapa yore lapa ki tebu ki ola soshi de ngane ki soshi yenati penati pangla de kogi digimendo
doji chiru chai ga de korong pat phasen rong khu di ga ga de ore.
Well, they need to be held 4 fingers below the navel. But then if you're in the Vajra posture with the feet up like that, then the feet are almost up to that level anyway. It's different when we sit in other sort of cross-legged postures. Tatant it's Jiparashero no Mochela Pena de Nagi Soshige Dunna de Tatan Shana Narang Dichedu then Tets Mideware, Tets Kalikabore, then na Rabre Sapoma Impa Drukenda Karichego.
Tatong go so yo zong si lendi la tu si zi mare. Korong hipa de desa de da andi mi so yo go chong ni pi da nong ka zina da ba no la rong ga da ka re pe na no to sa lo ti go na da nda ra go si na go to ri go ra da me le ti go na di thong ra go ri go ma ri. Then 다 파다 이거 되라는 소유가 딱 가서라 가래 샤디오나 든지지라 이 반홍하라 다롱가 히레 포 주더라용 무포 파 마다 노 반홍라용 소노 마동 다살라 가래 시 가지도 미가 따통들이 되면 가래 되 가지도 건진 디 반홍도 건히오 봐 말이 건진 미바 카하레 미가 따통도 다 저래 가지도 줄라 제가 무슨 뭐지最低把弄来用么上，米的龙巴要啥的，米的锅肉东北西巴地那的，米个大啥的地里进来大个玩意嘛都个3光就卡桥了玩意 생활하는 미바 안도나는 우포리 미도이나 생활을 건 히오레 누메리 미히오나 생활을 건 히오레 생활을 해도레 되면 미가 따사다 우수 된지라 요거를
We need to make a distinction between settling the gaze and looking at something. We are not looking at a point some 4 fingers width in front of the nose, in which case you might go sort of a bit cross-eyed and it's as though we're actually looking at something there. That's not at all the point, because we are settling the gaze. We are not using what's called visual consciousness, because actually our mind will be occupied with something else. The mind has its own work. It's not busy looking at something. We're not looking at a point in front of the nose. We're not looking at anything. But because we have the power of vision, we are settling that gaze somewhere in space, sort of 4 fingers in front of the nose. We're not crossing the eyes to look at that space. We're settling the gaze roughly there. The meaning is that we're not looking up, in which case you'd see the ceiling. You start to see something that captures your attention. We're not looking down where you see the floor and there's something to look at. In this space in front of the nose, there's nothing to look at. So we just park the gaze there, settle the gaze there, and our consciousness is not looking at anything. The consciousness has its own work depending on what the meditation practice is. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Good.
근데서도 제가 밀라 제 뭐제도 미그 히바티에도 본주래. 근데 시샤가 미그 때사 들리시를 되면 밀라 히바티에냐면 돼. 되면 밀라 히바티에나 미나고 미제고 그래. 근데 히바티에서도 다 희니 건도이나 희니 미바카리시나 달라 히바티 랑통거나 랑통고 다다바카리요나 데라 히바티 그래. 미그 따통도 로바 고고로 다 배나 언디 지나미 너화라 띠도라. 언디 지나 너화라 띠도라. 너리지나 야디도라. 근데 미그 코르 밑에산라고도 다 너리 기도하나 떼글이래라리. 너리 때는 동안을 밑에디도야. 근데 다 많이 반대세를 되면 히바다 밀라토 들이 세거나 디 너라 따디 히바데거나 근데 미제온도 밀라 칠치온도 여림보지나 미차온도 데디들 히바마데 코로롱가 요거나 미제만도 칠치만도 히바다 가서 봐봐 고로 희니 미바카리 고나 라랑토 가리 고는데 티 고한티들 미바티 차디티라 미로바드 번로레 미로바드 번로디티라 미제 말에 나 말에 페나 뒤정하로서 저도 좋은이라 레칼렌로 텐디렌디레 티티티라나 미 고롱 저 가렌토나 텔라디 미 고롱 티히발라 상노 동 요마레 예달라 상노 동 텐디조 번로리 따가 미 차기요 봐 말에 미 용 나면데 안다마르 처음도 티티티라 가리디나 티 미기 히발라 규도세 기요 봐 말에 예마도 더 번을 때인들라는 디 히바라 기도 뭐지 바고 롱 가리 고나 다 데라 미바시오 미 따사 되나라 요아사 들이세나 되니 미제면디.
Again, Rinpoche is making this distinction between settling the gaze, and actually using visual consciousness. And they're very different, because when there's visual consciousness, then we're actually using the gaze to look at something. We place our mind's attention through the eyes and through the gaze, and we're actually looking at something. When we do that, that's quite straining for the eyes. So when we do have a meditation or any sort of thing where we actually are looking intently at something, then quite quickly the eyes start to water, the eyes start to hurt, you can get hallucinations, things start to shimmer or to wobble. That's when the visual consciousness is constantly set with the gaze. So here, the visual consciousness isn't with the gaze. We're not involved with visual consciousness. So that's the gaze. The eye power is simply parked there, and our mind's attention is doing some other sort of work. And when we learn how to do that, then we find it's not at all tiring for the eyes. You can sit for a long time, and then you're not getting hallucinations, wobbles, sore eyes, tears. None of that comes because we don't have the stress of visual consciousness joined with the gaze. And in some meditations we do use the gaze and visual consciousness combined, in which case we have advice about how not to look for too long so that the eyes don't get strained. And then also in everyday work, we go all day long using our eyes, looking at things, but because we are not powerfully focused through visual consciousness all the time, then our eyes are not watering or hallucinating all day long. So there's a big difference between parking the gaze and actually looking. Yes?
With the hand posture, why is that hand posture better than resting your hands on your knees?
Lapagi koram chila. Te dan te nege penyan chepa yorere chik penam pemula isha. Te tes yapomenda te chepa yomare chepa yore.
chepa yore. Koron ta koron chu gari yodi na tala na riri lana penura고 hiye siyo bari. Pena no lopa nindi zo yodi tela na hiedong topa la manchu si penu yore song re. Nindi zo yona hiedong topa manchu li penu yore song mari. Ngaro ra ji gin ko jido ta cho manchu ha ko mandu te yin yang ta song ji jwan de ni ge song no tong ge ra. Ti ge ge xie di tela na ta nona no ala yona hiedong topa manchu si la penu yore. Ngaro zo topa chi se za de no cho hiedong te nga ja cho du nyong mo bi topa ni cho yore. Ti topa de la manchu si pen yore song re. Te pen ji de ne yo cha le do hiedong men do ma re. Ga le xie ge ba re tu so ji ge ba re. Pe na de 觉得用满这位呢，可能第要才的多呢，东西先入门对啊。第二种对说起来呢，等你用满的这下来按照东马的呀看了来我的，对说第二种用我的，别点着我，俺说你要才的多行动面着嘛的的，你行动个，你这种要呢行动个多罢了，没说是偏都有吧的，这里你对了，你都你来切吧有的。别的，那你切盘面呢？俺说点都那里就点对啊，点做那里现在嘞，那里现在呢点就点的，等着人呢，马你点呢，点我啦，等你用马你点呢点啦，他等你写完呢，点不卡送啊写完呢，等你俺说娘们办多少些东西，多把这处理好对，这这啦，偏头没对，等你呢，点没点了上头东西没对，可能家里啦，他多半出门出了，偏头有嘞意思对，别那个马你点呢，你这里。你离下不红的，对吧？亚龙的你跟那别个来搞对吧？我们现在三六年，亚龙的那三六年我的，马年的那三六年我的，现在呢六啦，哒，你说他现在这你同的店里，红喜我把的等于的，你这些的呢，也动了便宜是对。
There's a difference between the two postures because what happens is that each thing, I think that's the best way to translate it, it's each Dharma, it says, but it means each thing, each point in Dharma teachings has its own particular qualities and benefits. So in this 7-point posture, the hands, which are 4 fingers width below the navel, are particularly effective in reducing thoughts of anger, aggression, frustration, all of those things. And, we have the various mind poisons. We have desire, anger, jealousy, and pride, and confusion. And these different points of posture help reduce. Now, we can't say you put your hands there, you have no more anger and aggression. That would be wonderful. But what it means is, for instance, if you put water in this cup that's in front of Rinpoche, then the water's there in the cup. But gradually it evaporates, bit by bit, through being in the cup. So it doesn't evaporate in a few seconds. It takes time. Gradually it comes down. So what we find is that in this posture, and Rinpoche says this is what the Buddha taught. This is how the Buddha taught, that particular point of posture is very helpful in the long term in reducing the aggressivity, the frustration and anger in the mind. So that's why we do that. And he never saw something that said the same quality for the hands resting on the knees. So he said it's not just a question of comfort when we meditate. He said if it's just a question of comfort, well, you can just lean back, or why not even lie down? Why not even sleep, while we're at it, if we want to be comfortable? It's not a question of how we're comfortable. It's a question of a long-term work to reduce the mind poisons. And then Rinpoche said also, that, for instance, with these things of posture, when the posture is, what would you say, tightened up a bit, when you sit up a bit straighter and pull yourself up, then it's much harder to fall asleep than if you're gradually sort of slumping down, and then the more you slump, the easier it is to get sleepy and dozy. But when you're pulled up in a straight posture, that keeps the mind awake. In both cases, body and mind, the mind is resting with the body, straightened up or slumped, mind and body are together, but then the mind's different depending on what the body does.
Is the Vajra-like position just about stability for the body, or is there something more subtle going on there?
The Dorje Chultrung Kiko Ramuchela, Digi Johnson, the Penalupola G Tempo Chepa, Re, Demato Penyun Shenda.
Yori. Duji Chitu Javala Tiani, Yet Tempo Sisi Jamari, Duji Chitu Javala Tiani, Japan or Songre Senana, Trodo to Bala Pen was only Gomanot. Tendina Duji Chitu Jatinishina, Trodo to Pamchuli. Tangaroso Gom Jeditelana, no shop on the Mokosi, he don't say on the Mokosi, to me on the Yomago on the Mokobashi, that D ta Zahura.
Yes, there are various benefits. It's not simply a case of making a stable basis for the body. And one of the main benefits is that the masters of old said that Vajra posture is something which is very beneficial in the long term in reducing thoughts, mental activity related to jealousy. And so when we are training in meditation and in shamatha, we don't want the mind to wander off in feelings or thoughts of jealousy. We don't want it to wander off in feelings of anger and frustration. We don't want to wander off into desire and longing for this and that. So each of these points of posture is very helpful in keeping the mind with its focus.
고통 기세조래 너셔 해동 또 영모파 메리레로 시지 말이 메리 더 말이다 뒤또봐 요라 너도 뭐시시 그런 개시 틀려 편도 요래 라거래 되면 그 배셔지고 와저도 도지 지주지 되나 초도 때니 면도 한다고 뭐야 라바뇨 이거 세디 해동 카통아 면도 한다고 근데이나 로보디 대체디 이거 되는 영모바 카통아다 내 송지인다고 지다 좀 말로 토르고 말이지 더 말이 그런 너나는 또 봐도 뭐시시를 편도 요래 더 하고 그 말이 되면 디 초도 때니 면도 한다고 다 들이 인소나 온지 되면도 plan통 먹이지라고 쳐도 그런 송진도라 다좀 말은 로보야 보이서 너도 송진이라고 쳐도래디 디 또 봐더라시 오나 되는 알아서 고하는 너 온데 되라 인지문데 대인나는 대차 몬트로시가 편도 요래서 라그래 다음 번에도
and to be clearer about this, what the posture does, each of the points of posture is relevant to one or another of the mind poisons. I can't remember what I said before. It could have been right or could have been wrong. You need to check your notes. But anyway, we can't say that the point of posture would actually get rid of those things. I don't know if I said that, but it will stop thoughts and mental activity about those things arising while you practice. Otherwise it would be too easy. In order to become Buddha, we just need to sit in the posture for long enough, and if the actual posture was really getting rid of those things, with every minute, every hour that you sit in the posture, then just freezing yourself in the posture for long enough, you become Buddha. It's not like that. It takes work of wisdom and other things. But what it does do is the posture stops, while we're sitting in meditation practice, it stops thoughts and mental activity of anger, of jealousy and other things coming into the practice at that time. It stops our mind, it helps our mind not to wander off in those areas.
It's okay to squat which leg or which hand is on the top.
Oh, yeah. The Dorje Chutrung Ginongla da Lapa Shak, the Ye Yongi Jepa Gauchum Pora Vipena Kapla, Dindrabuche, Kapla, Chutrung, Dindrabuche.
Oh, the Yong Jolin Sandu Coron. Yoho Hala, Tina, Coro Simon, the two, Chatsuma, the Sonore, Lapayota, the Dilo Coron, Manopa, Mantrapachi, Segadutila, Segandu, Leton Bopalana, Petundu, Segandu, then you late on Bomayampa, Dagon, Yapochi, Seduinana, Cornidian, Gonja, the Himaria, Patas, Truparaja, in the Coron Uni, Trupaji, Himaris, and Ra. I tell you that we must do to Mopalana, Coron, the Lycian, the Lycian Chumadu, Munin, the Lycian, Corona, no, the Temo in the Jet. I tell you, Hijazo, the general song, right? The Lycian and the Lycian.
Let them pop a mena, then
that late Mopa Mena, the non to the men I did.
Yeah, it's important because that's the way it's been taught, and then especially for beginners, he says taking a lot of pains or a lot of care to get everything just right, just as it's been traditionally taught, that the right hand's on the left, the thumbs are joined like this is just like that. He says it's very important. So then I asked the question, well, what if you're not a beginner? And then he said, well, if you're not a beginner, maybe you don't need a posture at all. So it was... The Drupon Lavapa. And there was one famous Mahasiddha called Lavapa, and he slept for 12 years. He was just sprawled out sleeping for 12 years, but by the end of it he got the siddhis. So he wasn't a beginner.
So
if you're that sort of a person, you're not a beginner. So then, if we're not beginners, then we can just sleep for 12 years.
I'm not a beginner. I'm sorry, I am a beginner.
Yes.
I am a beginner. I didn't start meditating until I was about 60. And if I try and sit in a prostrate position, my left leg goes to sleep.
Uh-huh.
After about 10 minutes, and it stays asleep as long as I leave it in that position. Should I go on trying to cope with that, go through it, or should I not try and take a prostrate position?
Just asleep or painful?
Well, it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't really hurt.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nga leitan popo yin, in the young lo gonglo drukchugi nganda, and gomja maso, then it pena chultrong kampa ginam shot, that's kalikabore, pa kama chugi jela, then kampa yompala, then sorwa me, yongendo, then karche gogendo, then gacham pomare, then dendra shot gogendo.
나누 주도 제 가라이나 해고도와 배가 치와 인들이 되면 된지 송도 메리 얘네야나용 다 마다 바다 배나 가송하로서 ndawaki onde tela naji sopa nanga sopa 파신 소파시 게냐라용 지 탄다 지 니탄다 니 산탄나 산 다 된지 ndawo 송도와 단다오리 송지 전에 니가 이지 마키를 타고 그래 송메리 롱티데가 다 가서 탄다 공타도 시지리 다 자송지 다 너나지나 되니 너는 주도 간디 다 대다용 마도 빠요 오나나 용 다시 말해.
Well, it's beneficial to have the cross-legged posture, and so if you want the benefits, and if you want the benefits of that posture as a basis for doing the other steps of the practice, which all the texts say it is very beneficial, then it's maybe worth persisting with it. But then that doesn't mean that from day one you have to do the complete posture perfectly. It means that you do whatever you can and you try and gradually build it up, and you use whatever help you can to make that work better. He didn't say it, but I imagine massage or movements or whatever it is to help it along. And he said it's like in the vows text that, I don't know if we did it yesterday or it comes next, but it says, at the beginning you can take one precept, and then if you find you can keep that, you can take a second precept and a third precept, and gradually you build up until you have the whole thing, and then that's very beneficial. So he says, like this, if one isn't used to the posture, and it's difficult at first, it doesn't mean then we say, I can't do posture. It means we try, we do whatever we can, and whatever we can manage, there's that much benefit. And it says in so many texts, it does say, the body really helps the mind. So that's why it's worth persisting in.
Malu so sa